sovereign capabilities with the most trusted partners, and that creates enormous opportunities for partnership between Canada and Europe. We view ourselves as highly complementary to your economic and security goals.
Did you just hear that? The world order will be rebuilt out of Europe. That was Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking at a summit in Armenia. As the first non-European leader ever invited to address 44 nations at the European Political Community Summit. Not Congress, not the Oval Office, not Kuzma negotiations with our $1.2 trillion trading partner right next door, Armenia. While Canadians are paying $2.30 a liter for gas, while youth unemployment is hitting 15 to 18% in major cities, while people can't afford groceries, your Prime Minister flew to Europe to declare America is over and Europe is the future. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you goes beyond politics. This is about your money, your job, and your country's future. And it's happening right now. Let's break this down. On May 4th, 2026, Prime Minister Mark Carney attended the European Political Community Summit in Yerevan, Armenia, making him the very first non-European head of government ever invited to this forum. His message, America's era of global leadership is over. The new world order will be built from Europe, and Canada is going to help build it. Here's the quote directly. It is my strong personal view that as the international order will be rebuilt, but it will be rebuilt out of Europe. And here's what makes this even more jaw-dropping. He also told European leaders that Canada is the most European of non-European countries. He's literally rebranding Canada without asking you. He committed $270 million to NATO military capabilities in Europe. He signed Canada into the EU's Security Action for Europe, called SAFE, making Canada the first non-European country to join. And he announced $18 billion worth of critical minerals deals with European partners. All of this while Kuzma, the trade deal that protects 75% of Canada's $1.2 trillion in annual U.S. trade, is up for renewal by July 2026, and negotiations are reportedly stalled. You cannot make this up. Now let's talk about the Canada Strong Fund, because this story is even wilder. Mark Carney went in front of Canadians last week and announced a brand new sovereign wealth fund, modeled after Norway, $25 billion for Canadian infrastructure, energy, agriculture, and tech. Sounds amazing, right? There's just one problem. Norway's sovereign wealth fund built on oil revenues, $2.7 trillion. It covered nearly 25% of Norway's entire annual national budget, just from investment returns in 2025 alone. Canada's fund, built on borrowed money. Canada is already running a projected $66.9 billion deficit in 2026. Federal debt is already over $1.2 trillion, 41% of GDP. And debt service costs are climbing from $54 billion to $81 billion by 2030. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation's Franco Terrazzano said it clearly. This isn't a wealth fund. It's a debt-fueled corporate slush fund, gambling borrowed tax dollars on risky handouts. But here's the most shocking part. Even Elizabeth May, the Green Party leader, the furthest left politician in Parliament, voted with the Conservatives to reject Carney's fund. First time in her career. Think about that for a second. When the most progressive politician in the country is crossing the aisle to vote against your plan. Maybe your plan is bad. The parliamentary budget officer said there's zero detail on how the fund will actually operate. Zero. CBC, Carney's own taxpayer-funded media, called it out. Even mainstream media that typically supports the Liberals looked at this plan and went, "We don't know what this is. This isn't a wealth fund. This is Canada borrowing another $25 billion to hand out to companies the government chooses, with no transparency and no accountability." Now let's zoom out, because this is where it gets really serious. The United States still holds the world reserve currency. The U.S. economy grew 4.4% recently. The EU, its largest economies, are growing at barely 0.9%. Some aren't growing at all. Canada sells 20 times more to the United States than to China. 75% of all our trade, $1.2 trillion per year, goes south of the border. And our Prime Minister stood up in front of 44 European heads of state and said America's era is over. Even Canadian commentators who are not conservatives said this was unnecessary. One analyst put it perfectly. He did not need to poke Donald Trump in the face. Kuzma expires in 2026. Canada needs a deal. And instead of quietly negotiating, Carney is flying to European summits declaring a new world order without the US. Trump already pulled 5,000 troops from Germany. He's not exactly in a mood to reward Canada for this kind of rhetoric. And what about China? Here's a curveball nobody's talking about. Right after Carney's New World Order tour, China's envoy warned Canada to stop sending MPs to Taiwan and keep its naval ships out of the South China Sea. So while Carney is signaling anti-American alliances, China is making its own demands. Who's actually running Canadian foreign policy right now? The By George Journal published an explosive piece this morning titled "Reaction to Mark Carney's Vision of a New World Order Without the U.S." And the commentary is brutal. Canadian analysts are asking who voted for this. When did Canadians sign up to join a European bloc while our biggest customer is sitting right next door? Let's talk real numbers, because Carney keeps calling himself an economic genius, the man who will save Canada. Canada's inflation on food remains among the worst in the G7. Gas is over $2.30 a liter in Vancouver. Housing affordability is at historic lows. Youth unemployment is 15–18% in major cities. And a new Angus Reid poll shows Canadians are failing Carney's government on affordability, despite giving him a passing grade on international relations. Meanwhile, CETA, the Canada-EU trade deal, was signed in 2017. 9 years ago. More than 1/3 of European countries still haven't fully ratified it. So Carney is betting Canada's economic future on a trading bloc that can't even ratify a deal it signed a decade ago. The Logic magazine, not a conservative publication, asked European trade experts directly, is this realistic? And the answer was blunt. EU growth is puny, red tape is enormous. The idea that we can replace $1.2 trillion in U.S. trade with EU partnerships is fantasy. One Reuters analysis summed it up perfectly. This is a country that's fundamentally getting poorer for many people. Carney is not being blamed for the price of cheese and juice yet, but that moment is coming. And when it does, Canadians are going to look back at this moment, at the Armenia speech, at the New World Order declaration, at the $25 billion debt fund, and ask, why wasn't anyone paying attention? So what is the solution? It's actually simple. Conservatives, moderates, even some liberals know it. Number one, Canada needs a tariff-free deal with the United States. We sell 20 times more to America than to China. That ratio may shift slightly, but the U.S. will always be our biggest customer. We need CUSMA renewed, and we need it done right. Number two, if you want a real sovereign wealth fund, do it like Alberta did in 1976, or like Norway did. Use oil and gas revenues. Canada has enormous energy wealth. Use that surplus to seed a fund. Don't borrow $25 billion and call it a wealth fund. Number three, stop declaring geopolitical wars in speeches while your own people can't afford groceries. You cannot lead a new world order when you can't negotiate a trade deal with the one country your economy depends on. The Conservative motion in Parliament this week was clear. Pierre Poilievre laid it out. Real sovereign wealth funds require surpluses. Canada has been running deficits for 11 years. You cannot build wealth on debt. This is basic math. And the fact that Elizabeth May, someone who has never voted with the Conservatives in her career, crossed the aisle to vote against Carney's fund tells you everything. This is not a right-left issue anymore. This is a common sense issue. Here's where we are, Canada. And for my American friends watching, yes, this affects you too. Your neighbor to the north just sent its prime minister to a European summit to declare that America's era is over, while simultaneously stalling trade negotiations that cover $1.2 trillion in annual trade, while borrowing $25 billion it doesn't have. While average Canadians are drowning in the highest food inflation in the G7, this isn't a left-right issue. This is a reality issue. The EU's own defense minister said the United States remains the indispensable nation for European defense. Europe can't defend itself without American backing, and Carney wants to build Canada's future on that foundation. I'm going to keep covering this story because it matters, not just for Canada, but for the entire relationship between our two countries, and for what it means when a government starts chasing ideology instead of reality. Drop a comment below. Do you think Carney's European strategy makes sense for Canada? Or do you think he's walking away from the most important economic relationship in Canadian history? If this video opened your eyes, share it, because the mainstream media is barely covering what this actually means. It falls on us. I'll see you in the next one.